torn map. Once, by mistake, she tore a map in half. She taped it back, but crookedly. Now all the roads ended in water. There were mountains by her hometown. Wouldn't it be nice if that were true? I'd tear a map and be right next to you. Thank you for coming to Shangri-La. There is no place on the whole planet I would rather be. Michael and I have had, my husband sitting in the back, the most exquisite 3 weeks staying in the room back here. It's unimaginable. We have one more week to go. We are so grateful to Conrad, to the entire beautiful staff of Shangri-La, both present and past, especially to Carol and Paige, who put this event together today, but to every single person who works here and loves this place. Michael and I are also deeply grateful to Frank Stewart, who changed our lives 25 years ago when we first were invited to come to Honolulu for a semester, and everything was different in our lives after that. We were always staring to the Pacific with a different mind, different heart. Thank you for your hospitality. I do think that from here on, after we leave Shangri-La, it's all downhill. In general. But I think that's okay, because I think it's nice in life to visit a place that you know could never be improved upon. Any place you visit, to stand in the silence here at 5:30 a.m. and watch the light come up, to look out to the ocean and feel the changes every day. It's okay to know where the high point was. I feel that now. Gratitude beyond measure to Doris Duke. I think of her now as the poet of space, a visionary person who was able, at the early ages of 23 and 24, to imagine how clarifying art might be gathered together in a place like this. I don't know what you were doing at 23 or 24, but I wasn't having any vision that big. Some of you may not be 23 or 24 yet. And I look back to that moment in her own life with amazement and awe that she could visualize in such a way. I'm in love with this book, Doris Duke's Shangri-La, which some of you may see or have, and the gorgeous introduction essay by Carol Beer, where she says, Doris Duke seems to have selected objects quickly, but carefully, with a vision toward the whole, the details of which changed over time, while the overall conception remained the same, to immerse herself in beauty and to share it with us. Those of us who were lucky to fall in love with poetry early knew there was some magic about putting words down in notebooks, even if we didn't know where they were going, what they might turn into, if they might someday be part of a poem, if anyone would ever read them. It didn't matter. The notebook became the oasis of inspiration for many of us. This beautiful domain, Shangri-La, became a 60-year project for Doris Duke, who was not afraid to revise. And I love how the different tours I have taken here emphasize the changes she made over time. Because after a long life as a writer, I do think revision is one of the most precious parts of the whole experience. The other night, I had a dream about a potluck dinner that Michael and I would host in this very room. Now that's getting brazen. We've started saying the few times we leave the property, let's go home now. And to call Shangri-La home, even for 1 month, is brazen. But to dream of a party you might have, a potluck in this room, is even worse. And the theme that I was sending out to people who would come to the potluck was you have to bring a dish that for you represents bliss. It's perfect, right? What would you bring? I've been thinking about it ever since. Bliss in a blissful place. 25 years ago, our son began kindergarten at Hokulani Elementary School. Reach for the stars. I cried on his first day. In the evenings, he would want me to walk with him around the neighborhood on what he called potion walks. We were renting a little apartment in the home of Craig Howes up in St. Louis Heights. And our son said, we need to pick up petals because they've fallen, but they're still beautiful. We need to pick up leaves, the way they curl up when they dry. Now and then we'd find a stone. And we had all these little bags lined up on the tiny kitchen counter, the potion walks. And I've thought about them over the years. He would go on to write letters to his teacher here, to wish he remembered all the Hawaiian he had learned in kindergarten Hawaiian class, to send Christmas cards to his teacher, to want to come back here as often as he could. But he would go on in life to become a teacher himself, remembering those early days here. And I've remembered his emotion over rubbish carefully tied together. How he would say, we might need it in the future. I think that's what poets do when we write in our notebooks. What do I need from this day in the future? Maybe. If I don't write it down, I might forget it. This year in January, I was working in Japan, and a girl named Juna wrote me a message. In Japanese, we have a word, yutori, that means space. Not physical space, but life space. It means leaving the house a little bit early so you don't have to rush. It means giving yourself the space in life to mess up a little or to surprise yourself and succeed. It means not beating yourself up every night for eating a cookie. In thinking about poetry this week, I feel poetry embodies yutori. I didn't know. Doris Duke imagined life space. We imagine life space, what we need in the interior spaciousness in order to balance everything else we're given, is what I've been thinking about during these magical weeks. The poet Kazim Ali wrote, "My time in the world was only a gesture." What a line. When you stare at water, you think about the many gestures it makes. I found in my bag 3 lines from a Texas poet who doesn't write anymore, but he wrote for years, Walter MacDonald. "A man soon to be married finds in the silt a shark's tooth buried 1,000,000 years." I found some words the poet William Stafford wrote 2 days before his very sudden death, the same year that Doris Duke died. Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor. What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air? 25 years ago, I wrote this little piece called Waikiki. And by the way, Frank, I still have in this book the reading you organized. It's the only poster I've ever kept in a book that long. On the famous beach in Honolulu, a small girl cried and cried and cried. She stood stiff-legged, poking her feet into the sand. Her parents kneeled, whispered, cajoled. Then they tried walking away. They had a baby in their arms. They strolled surprisingly far down the beach, but never took their eyes off her. She raised the volume on her crying, staring straight out to sea. Her pink bathing suit, its ruffled rump. Our eyes followed the silver planes rising off the runway. I loved every plane I was not on. I loved the wailing girl who saw no one else on that beach but herself, whose throat worked hard to find the biggest, saddest sound. After her parents gave up and dragged her, still screaming, down the beach, we went and sat by the poked-in place her feet had made and funneled up the billion particles into a mound. Well, we did go back and look for that mound on a subsequent day, and of course it was gone. And that's the magic of being here by the water. The time is so present for all of us. I found also a note our son wrote to me during that same period of time. We had been urging him to be polite at many dinners with adults, and he sent me an annoyed note. You know I'm not a friendliness machine. Now, I've never used that in a poem, but to me that was language that might be helpful somewhere down the road. So I thought I would read a few poems written in this space in the past 3 weeks, if that is okay. That is also a brazen thing to do, because they haven't been revised as much as they will need to be. But I hope you'll forgive. I'd rather hear fresh poems if I was in a room this deep. Okay. So this is called Hawaii Library Card, 25 years old. Maybe we could check out another month. Any month on Oahu shines like an emerald in a 17th century necklace. Wonderful guide Susan said, Doris Duke wasn't just interesting, she was interested. Light on the water seizes us all. Napua, under palms, braiding leaves. No one wants to leave. This heaviness sweeps across departures at the airport. Maybe that's why I saved the library card. More to witness, to savor, more to read. Wherever I want, yellow and white petals would still be falling in my sleep. I did mean to say after the Waikiki piece that I have been a poet unashamed to be attracted to anecdote. I think we have many moments during any given day that might call to us. They are like the light on the water that is gone quickly. And so since childhood, I was a poet who would write down just a little scene or a little quote in a restaurant or a tiny thing. You would never know if it would grow into something bigger. Dear Doris, I pledge allegiance to your amazing mind that saw into time. Each room of your house, a stanza of the poem. Stanza comes from standing place. Ancient tiles, intricate hammered lamps, spacious revelations, ceiling of cracks, blue rims, planetary patterns, constellations of color, woolen rugs, solitude, moving fountains, slopes, painted columns, white marble stairs, chocolate spigot, deep turquoise pool, heavy faucet handles, as if you're still with us, noticing, arranging, bowing, basking. Could pleasure in beauty be the true central time zone? Restlessness banished. Other places one could go or be simply foam. Quiet mind. You're easier to find in mornings. Afternoons, you disperse a spray of random thoughts against the rocks. Companionable for Doris Duke. The word Islamic has been so lonely lately for gentle friends. Art sitting beside it, restores its heart. Foundation, what it always thought of itself as, earthen foundation for a house of days. My father's family was Muslim. My father bravely announced to his family at about the age of 12 that he wanted to be an ecumenical person. He did not plan to follow any religious tradition in a particular way, but he hoped to respect all of them. And his mother, who was very devout, accepted that. My mother was raised in a Christian Lutheran household in the American Midwest, and she announced to her parents at the age of 18 that she did not wish to follow their upbringing of religion in her life, and she had trouble for years. My father had no trouble. His mother lived to be, here she is at 95. She lived to be 106. She loved my husband. They saved each other's lives more than once. And she said, "I don't want to die," in Arabic, "till everyone I don't like dies first." But she liked everybody. She liked Jewish scholars who would come to interview her for oral history projects. She liked children. She liked many people more than I could understand sometimes. Even after being tear gassed, she said, "They just don't know our stories." Dear Doris, my Siti, who never went anywhere but Mecca, bowed down 5 times a day, covered her face when airplanes passed over, would have loved you, who went everywhere, sea and sky. She would have loved your height, your eye for beauty, geometric patterns, radiant tiles, overlays of color. My Siti, whose only art was lack of blame, a pile of gingham sheep-wool comforters stacked in her cupboard, intricate pink stitchery on the front of a dress. Doris and Siti, now my dinner party dream. Siti so short, Doris so tall, savoring bites from the same painted plate. We have been watching birds with great reverence and respect every evening on the lawn. There's quite a hubbub at sundown, quite a hubbub early in the morning. We heard an incredible call and answer the other day that I actually was able to tape in my phone. And the bird who was leading the call and answer had a very wriggling worm in its mouth, which seemed amazing to me that it could do such beautiful sounds as it held dinner. But it reminded me of a not so reverent poem, and this is also the kind of thing I'm not ashamed to write down in my notebooks. This is called Lying While Birding. This is an earlier piece, but I think I'll throw it out after this. Yes, yes, I see it. So they won't keep telling you where it is. In the Damascus Room. Who else has written a poem 60 years long? Walt Whitman revised Leaves of Grass all his life. He even reviewed it as if he were someone else. Doris Duke revised the stanzas of her house again and again, shrine of light, sofa, a perfect welcoming word. She cleansed surfaces with a Q-tip, a dipped rag. She directed, realigned, moved tile, changed the arch. If only such respect for the beauty of Damascus could have saved that great city so much pain. If you are the child of a refugee, you do not sleep easily when they are crossing the sea on small rafts and you know they can't swim. He couldn't swim either. He swam through sorrow, though, and made it to the other side, then tried to be happy, build a new life. They are the bravest people on earth right now. Don't dare look down on them. Each mind a universe swirling as many rich details as yours. Though the shirt be torn and the sea too wide for comfort, and no place to receive a letter for a very long time. And if we can reach out a hand, we better. Beauty. And this is thinking about how often in times of political turmoil, I know I mentioned the endless election season in the title for this presentation, but being here, it's been very nice to be away from a television. But being here and thinking about what is more timeless, how much you can bear to watch, how much serves you as a citizen and keeps you up to date, and then how much you need to balance it with has been very interesting. A friend of mine, Judith Barrington, from England originally, who taught many poetry workshops in her life, used to begin by asking the group, write down your list of resistances, the things that keep you from doing your writing. And everybody would make a list, very animated list. And then Judith would pause and take a deep breath and say, now write down the real one, the one you left off. Generally, it had something to do with not having enough time or not believing in oneself enough. And then she would proceed to make those part of the heart of her ongoing time with him. Not having enough time. That's one thing I've always loved about poetry. How long is it? Tiny increments. You can read a poem in a minute and read it again. You can copy it and carry it in your pocket and give it away. That won't take away too much of your time. And as for belief in yourself, I often think about what the wonderful poet Edward Field said, who had a lot of trouble believing in himself as a young man, but grew into positivism and encouragement for so many others. He edited a book that became a classic called A Geography of Poets years ago. I heard some students ask him once, don't you have doubt? He said, of course I do. I treat it as my favorite guest. I seat it, I feed it dinner, I talk to it, and then I send it on its way. And I know it will come back, but you have to serve your guests, right? Brilliant. After you hear something like that, it changes your life. Beauty. I think many Arab American poets have felt, I probably shouldn't speak for the group, but I know I've felt often guilty about my lucky life in recent years. Guilty that I can't solve the problems of the world. Guilty that I can't save refugees from what they're going through. Lots of kinds of guilt, more than personal doubt. But this poem has helped me, Pablo Neruda. It's called This Is Simple. Power is mute, the trees tell me, and so is profundity, say the roots. And purity, too, says the grain. No tree ever said, I'm the tallest. No root ever said, I come from deeper down. And bread never said, what is better than bread? A poem like that can remind you that it's all right to write about trees and bread, because what we're wishing for, what we're hoping for, is that all of our brethren could enjoy such simple things. For years, I've carried Taha Muhammad Ali's poem, Palestinian poet, Abd al-Hadi Fights a Superpower, in my bag. And I'm just going to read the beginning. In his life, he neither wrote nor read. In his life, he didn't cut down a single tree, didn't slit the throat of a single calf. In his life, he did not speak of the New York Times behind its back, didn't raise his voice to a soul, except in his saying, come in, Ahlan, please, by God, you can't refuse. And the poem goes on. Taha continued to live in the Galilee all of his life and write poems about the people he knew and the places he treasured. So this is hoping for more beauty in all regions of our world. For Doris Duke, to be in the presence of, bathed in, surrounded by, enraptured, absorbed by, awestruck, thunderstruck, transformed. You don't look at the Damascus Room. It washes over you. You don't stare from somewhere outside, lifted by another kind of wave, petals twining, mingled hues. Who knows any word this intricate, vividly woven? A whole ceiling, a door. You open too. I think it is helpful to pick notebooks appropriate to your places. Sometimes I had 3 wave notebooks that I'd been saving for years. They came here. I think it is helpful to get in the habit of listening to and writing down things that come to you, because more will be given if you do that. That kind of intuitive belief that things could be spoken out of the air. Michael and I had a very rough honeymoon many years ago, on which we were robbed, assaulted, had food poisoning, and various other things. And we didn't want to tell anybody back home because they already thought we were a little foolish going off on this long trip we had planned. On the night after we had been robbed of everything, and it is a daunting experience to be on a continent where you have not one friend without anything. No money, no passport, nothing. What do you do next if you don't want to call home? A voice spoke to me, a woman's voice, across the plaza in the town of Popayan, Colombia. And I'll just say the beginning of this poem because it's been around for a while now, but I never could have known that that would be the poem to help me get through that experience, or that that would be the poem of all my poems that most people would want to reprint. It's shocked me how far that poem has gone, and I always have to write on the permissions paper, I don't feel as if I wrote this poem. I was only the conduit. I was the conveyor belt. I was the secretary, and I wrote it down exactly as I heard it. But the poem starts out, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape is between the regions of kindness. Well, it goes on. I was surprised. It was printed in quite a few books about business and finance after some scandals of recent years and some financial catastrophes. It's the only poem that I know of mine that's ever been printed in books about finance. But because I was in the habit from early childhood of listening for that voice, I think more was given. And I would urge you all, in order to feel your own yutori, life space, just balancing you out every day of the year. You deserve it. We all deserve it. Why not? You are living in a poem every day. Your mind is probably twice as rich as mine is because you live in Hawaii. Write a few things down. That's my soapbox. I think it helps us. These things end up being little hinges for whatever else is given. And for me, that's been where all the poems came from. So I'll just read this one other poem. I don't think it's found its end yet, but it's a first draft. I would hate to have this be its end, actually. but just thinking about the larger world, how nice it's been not to read a newspaper every day. And then we'll see if anybody has any questions or answers or inspirations. This is called This Grief Without a Residence. Where have the old tile painters of Damascus gone? The men of Jericho and Jerusalem who could sit for hours delicately swirling. What has happened to their patience, the brushes, pots and tubes of concentrated color? What has happened to the chisel and mallet, hammering neat triangles into the lamp's silver globe? Vocabularies of making are folding their small silken tents, slipping into the distance. I am not even sure mallet is the right word. We have lost the pouch with separate cloth pockets for every tool, the punch, the sieve, the bobbin. Where is Adli Alabzi, who came to our Aleppo hotel before dawn, a man we'd never met or heard of, phoning from the lobby, insisting he would take us on a sunrise tour of his most precious city? We dressed quickly, climbed steep stairs, circled the ancient wall, flooded pink. The gentle architect raised his arms above his head. He could have abducted us. This thought never occurred. Later, there was coffee, ancient arching courtyard, scurrying hosts, small alleyways piled with dark threads, skeins of wool, a joy abounding. We carried the laughter for years. Has this kind man been forced to view his city's destruction? I think he might jump off that wall not to see it. Thank you so much for listening in the Playhouse so kindly and generously. I hope I find another way to end that poem. Does anyone have a question or answer? Yes, thank you.
I have a
Hi.
request.
Yes.
Would you mind reading the poem Kindness in its entirety?
Okay. I think I can say it, but just in case. Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. He too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I did not read the poem Red Brocade, which to me was always a poem representative of Arab Islamic hospitality, the enormous hospitality of the Middle East, wherein if you showed up at anyone's door, classroom door, campus office, any place, they would insist you come in for tea, coffee, something with them. And Michael and I live downtown rather near the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas, and I have answered countless travelers' questions, where is the Alamo? And I have never invited a single one in. And this gives me guilt, and I think about that hospitality with which I was raised, and, you know, we think we're nice. You're very, very nice in Hawaii. Your aloha is bigger than most welcomes anywhere. But that is something for those of us who love the real Middle East, something that has hurt worse than anything in recent years, that people are not talking about that as much unless they have their own experience to bolster them forward. Thank you. And I think this house, at this time in history, serves a very important stewardship in that regard, to remind people of the beauty which exists all over the Middle East. I have never seen more studious, fervent, beautiful kids in classrooms than I've seen all over the Middle East, working, reciting poems, raising their hands. I was very happy that in this gorgeous tile work, there are gymnasts, upside-down gymnasts. Somehow this seems very important at this moment in time when things seem very topsy-turvy in too many regions. Those gymnasts will land on their feet. That metaphor means a lot. Any questions? I know there are lots of poets in the room. There are many wonderful people in the room, people of great life space. If you don't ask one, I'm going to keep talking for a few more minutes. I have carried with me for years this Charles Simic quote from the Boston Review. Charles Simic, who was born in what used to be called Yugoslavia, had taught in New Hampshire for many years, one of our favorite poets for years. He said in an interview, he was talking about American poets, "Our big secret, our unspoken literary scandal, is the near total ignorance by our writers, editors, and academics of literature being written elsewhere in the world." And I just want to say, in honor of Manoa and Frank Stewart, that I think here in Hawaii you have the journal, the #1 journal that has done more to counterbalance what Charles Simic was saying than any other journal in the nation and probably the whole world. And it's something that should be celebrated at every turn. It has never been equaled by any journal I encounter anywhere. And that's something to be very proud of. I know in San Antonio, I'm always telling young kids who come up to me in restaurants, where should I send my poems? Well, you know, we have this journal here down the block, and we have that place, and all these local people, and they always go, really? And I think many times we don't honor the things that are in our hometown or our home place. We don't pay attention to them. These kids are wanting to send their work out to some big important place. Well, why don't you respect all the projects that are going on right here and start? Thank you, Manoa. Thank you, Frank Stewart. Thank you. So, one more question. Any other question? No one's asking questions. It's because you're all dazzled by the beauty of the venue. I understand that. I'm surprised I've been able to write anything at all. I mean, I'm surprised I just haven't stood outside staring at the water the entire time. I would like to close with a quick piece, and I would like to say a few quotes that have been very important to me this week from the painter Agnes Martin, and she's been important to me for a long time, and I've just been thinking about her work and her spirit and her eye, her inner eye here. And so I looked up an essay from her and just a couple of quotes from her essay about beauty is the mystery of life. It is not in the eye, it is in my mind. It is not always the role of an artist to worry about life, to feel responsible for creating a better world. This is a very serious distraction. When you think of something that you should do, and your inner mind says yes, and you feel elated, call this inspiration. For an artist, this is the only way. There is no other help anywhere. You must listen to your own mind. When you look in your mind, you may find it covered with a lot of rubbishy thoughts. You have to penetrate these and hear what your mind is telling you to do. An artist's life is adventurous, one new thing after another. I think those waves tell us all those things every day. And I do think there are things everywhere on the sidewalk, especially here, worthy of being picked up and put in little potion bags for later usage. So I'm actually going to close with these two very fast, one in Hawaii and one not. This is from a trip about 4 years ago. It was the first time I ever came to Shangri-La. I had just broken my arm. I was in horrific pain. I was having surgery the next day, and Shangri-La distracted me. I also read in the newspaper about a person who distracted me, Mary Endo. I just have to ask, did anyone in this room ever know Mary Endo? At a barber shop. Okay. Mary of Kalihi is closing down. Today, her last, after 62 years of trimming hair, soaping necks. Mary, with the candy-striped awning, who gives an opinion, no topic taboo. Mary, you could count on. 62 years, hardly a drop in the shaving mug. Bring her a thank you bigger than Honolulu. Bring her a hug. Your whole life, she was in here. Something else you could have counted on, had you known. Now banished by a landlord you would personally like to shear. I hope he's not in here. Mary, at 91, taking it in stride. When you swing the door, she's cutting a guy's hair on her last day, just like Annie, wearing a pink apron, her own hair perfectly styled. She looks quizzical when you hand over the newspaper feature and giant red rose. Guy says, "See, Mary? Everybody loves you." 4 chairs waiting, regulars lined up for last listen, final clip. What is the size of this farewell? Mary, Mary, you have such a strong grip. Well, of course, when you have a broken arm, you really notice someone else's grip. She was beautiful, and I hope is thriving. Thank you for listening. This is Gate A4, and then we will adjourn to the upper lawn of Shangri-La for a lovely dinner. Gate A4, this is written as a short prose poem. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been detained 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight agent. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shu dawa, shu biddak habibti. Stand shway, min fadlik, shu bitsawi." The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, She stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "You're fine. We'll get there. Who's picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English, saying I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the heck of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from the flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost.